see, who do we have from the clerk's office? Looks like the recording has started.
Suzanne, this is Jennifer. I'm here from the clerk's office.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Jennifer. We'll go ahead and get started then. I now call to order this work session of the Anchorage Assembly regarding AO 2021-71S, amending AMC 21.08.0050G to allow rolled curb on residential minor streets. It is Friday, February 11, 2022, and we are noticed from 1 to 2 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Constant. Ms. Allard. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
And Ms. Zolotel.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I just want to note that the documents for this work session are available at muni.org. If you click on Assembly and at the top on Assembly Work Sessions and scroll down, you'll see 3 documents. The middle document, the Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution number 2021-030, includes about 30 pages of documents in that one. This item is up for public hearing on Tuesday's regular assembly meeting of February 15. It is item 14K. It's sponsored by John Weddleton and Forrest Dunbar. And so I will go to the sponsors first. And I believe Mr. Weddleton, you'll be kicking things off.
I am. What ordinance number did you say?
I'm sorry, that's wrong. Oh, no, I said 2021-71S.
Okay, I thought you said a different number. So, yeah, that's what we're looking at. And I would say broadly 7.1. We also have the S that was presented to us. So just to get things oriented, I'd make a few comments and then pass it over to Brandon Marcotte with Triad Engineering, who's got kind of real hands-on experience with this. And then Bill Taylor may have some information as well. And I think we've also got Adam Trombley, Ron Thompson. I saw Dave Whitfield here. May want to go through and enhance the discussion a bit. So you do have the link at the work session has a S version that came through. We sent it last fall to the planning department, and it went through Planning and Zoning Commission and platting, and they came back with the S version. So that's basically a product of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the platting. And that document starts off with that, then it goes through and you'll see the original version in there. You see comments from the various departments, comments from both platting and planning, their resolutions, and also public comments at the end. So it's quite a bit in that document. The original intent of this is that it would lower development costs and increase flexibility for builders. And one thing that tells us we need to relook at a section of code is that variances are very common. And that kind of tells us, okay, something's out of alignment here. So, and that's the case with, the sections of code where it would require vertical curbs. They're very often going for variances and get the variances. So it just adds cost and delay to getting a project going. It was fairly limited. It was to low traffic roads, which is less than 500 average daily traffic. And that's typically just under 10 per household. So that's, for minor neighborhood streets, which are defined as less than, 50 homes essentially on them. And we had kind of looked at it. The intent was it would only look at vertical curbs. There are times, and I should say, vertical curbs are important. They discourage people from parking up on the sidewalk. And I think that's very clear and well supported. And I'm all about walkability. When we put this in code, I was at the forefront of saying we need to get vertical curbs in the code and actually increase the requirements when we did the new Title 21. Since then, and so I still support them, but since then we've seen cases where they add costs without really bringing that value. And you can see that in cases where there's, just a short stretch, you might have 5 to 10 feet of vertical curb, and that doesn't stop anyone from popping up onto the sidewalk. So you've added a cost without any benefit. You may have vertical curb where there's no parking allowed anyway. There's just no benefit there. So there's reason to look at it. A lot of variances. There's places where it adds costs and there's really no benefit. So in the original version, we had essentially left it, with the lower traffic streets, minor neighborhood streets, and traffic engineer could decide where they determined the impact on walkability would not be significant. We didn't really list out what those would be because there are discussions of what's walkable in code and also in various planning documents. So that was what led to the process we hit. So, or the starting point. So then some of the things that were raised, and if you go through that long document, I just went through there and kind of wrote down the key points that people brought up. And one was a question, show us the cost saving basis or analysis. That was from planning. And then question, why not use variance system that's allowed? And I think Bill or Brandon can talk to that because they do, and they generally succeed. Then there were comments that the traffic engineer needs more specific guidance. And we had questions at a previous, I think, committee meeting on this. And the question was, would this apply to new subdivisions only or also to old? Like, would South Addition lose its vertical curbs and over time have rolled curbs? So that's an important point. Points that we heard from, that vertical curbs as a positive is that they make it harder for homeowners to expand the width of driveways beyond what's allowed in code. And then the point, I think, and Bill can talk about some of the reasons for having rolled curbs, and that's where you have a property where he goes in as a developer, not the home builder necessarily, and you don't know when the purchaser of the lot, how they have the home oriented, where will the driveway be? So the point was made that, well, in smaller lots, you pretty much do know. And then was a suggestion that if there is a change, it should be limited to subdivisions with a minimum lot of width of 60 feet, where you would really have a lot of uncertainty on where the driveway would go. We also have a letter from private development that recommended only with an exception for 3-foot separation for sidewalk. More recently, on February 9th, just a few days ago, got a letter from private development said that they support the S version as it's written. Right away from had comments that driveway access is required to be 6 inches thick. And I just put that in there if anyone runs into that. That's only for commercial, I understand, and Bill could verify that when he speaks. And then Solid Waste Services says they like vertical because when they drop the trash can, it won't go flying too far. It bumps into the vertical curb. So that's my summary of comments. And that leaves us with the original version, which leaves the traffic engineering deciding, when rolled curves would be allowed, if vertical is generally recommended. And then the S version, which is, top of the stack right now. And that made changes where it says the only exception is when the sidewalk separated from the curb by a minimum of 4 feet. And so you'd have some kind of landscape buffer there. And also cases where there's no sidewalk required, you could have rolled curbs. So it's quite a bit different. So basically where we've landed with the S version is in a position where no one's really happy. It doesn't really give the developers much, and it doesn't, I think for people who just want vertical curbs, well, they'll get, basically we are where we were without a lot of change. So it's not really a particularly useful or happy place in the S version. So with that, what I would like to do, if I could share, is have, I think, Brandon speak and show some examples on a subdivision that they did in Powder Ridge and show where the requirement for vertical curbs wasn't working well. And I think Bill can talk about a recent development that he did as well.
Thanks, John. And before we do that, Ms. Elatel is in the queue.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, just kind of as a base matter, and I think John mentioned it, but so currently rolled curbs are allowed if there's the 4-foot landscape buffer, or if sidewalk is not allowed. Is that the starting place right now for the allowance of rolled curbs?
No, it would be vertical curbs typically, but in the S version, it would allow rolled curbs if you have that buffer and where there's no sidewalk no sidewalk planned anyway or required.
So I
And
guess
that
I'd
would
like
be, sorry, go ahead.
stated from the outset right now when rolled curbs are allowed by right, if at all. I want to start with that fundamental place. If anyone can, if someone can speak to that before we jump into kind of the proposed changes, because I've been asked that question a lot.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, if I could, Chair, I think Dave Whitfield or someone from
Sure.
planning could probably address that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Dave Whitfield, Planning Department. Right now, all new residential subdivisions would require a vertical curb. We have been seeing a number of variances being applied for to reduce that standard to a rolled curb, but currently vertical curb is required.
Thank you. That helps. That's a good starting point now for seeing where we might be headed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. So yes, if we want to go ahead now, Mr. Weddleton, with the presentation or the rest of the discussion.
Sure, Brandon,
Great.
do you want to, can you kind of take over and upload the photos of Curry Ridge?
Yeah, can everybody see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, John. Thanks for the opportunity to provide some input on this. What I have here is basically a copy of our variance requests that we have been submitting on past projects. We have submitted, I think, 4 or 5 variance requests now on the vertical curb requirement, and we have been successful on all of them. We've received planning board approval on every request, one as recent as last week. So they're becoming more common, and I think we're seeing pretty consistent results at planning board through the variance process. These variances are almost a copy-paste application, to be honest. The reasons for the request are generally listed here for everyone to read, and I can go down through them briefly. And John mentioned a few of these in his discussion, but it's a costly endeavor in terms of the design portion. All the driveway locations have to be predetermined by either the engineer and likely with the developer. So that gets determined in the design phase. So the driveway cuts get included into the civil plans, which increases cost. Then the municipality reviews the plans, and oftentimes they end up changing those driveway locations. We had on the one instance in Curry Ridge, which required vertical curb, the municipality ended up changing a number of those driveway cuts just because they didn't like the location of where they were adjacent to maybe some ADA crossings or an intersection. And so the developer then doesn't get the option to run with the house configuration that he does in some cases because the municipality will change them again. Once we get into construction, then extensive surveys needed to locate all of these cuts, which increased cost to the developer as well. And then the labor associated with changing the curb type so frequently increases the cost for construction substantially. What we found in Curry Ridge is that, which is an R1 type development, is that you end up with an undulating effect on the sidewalk. There's so many transitions, and the locations of the vertical curb are so short that you really get this undulating effect that really, I think, increases the propensity for tripping hazards. Other items that we've noticed is that winter plowing operations are likely to damage curbs with the multitude of transitions that you'll see. I think any plow operator would have a challenge not damaging the transitions or damaging the vertical curb. And then it goes back to the flexibility for the home construction. In that Curry Ridge development, the driveways that got moved by that were requested to be relocated by the traffic department ended up not working for the developer, and he had to end up relocating them yet again. And so what you see is after construction, relocations can run from $5,000 to $10,000. They're very expensive if you want to move these. It involves cutting out the sidewalk, cutting out the curb, cutting the asphalt, and then repouring all of this to reconfigure for the new driveway location. And the unfortunate side effect of that is now you're cutting your pavement and you're adding more penetrations in your otherwise brand new road. So the after effects of the maintenance component are something to be considered as well. And finally, here's the results of said development. Again, this is Curry Ridge, or what's now called Hamilton Subdivision. It's located in the Powder Ridge neighborhood of Eagle River. And if you can see here closely, you'll see the number of transitions for the individual driveways. It's to the point where the parking on the street is negatively impacted. There's likely no areas to park. At least in this first picture, you can see 2 locations where you probably can't even park a car there. One of the other things that we've noticed is the transitions are so frequent and oftentimes get so long that it wouldn't necessarily prohibit an individual from driving up on the sidewalk if they wanted to. So it's not necessarily prohibiting that type of effect. So as I mentioned, this has been something that we've been successful with Planning Board. They have been receptive to the reasons that we've proposed in these variance requests. And some of their acknowledgements in those approvals are acknowledging that the tripping hazard is there, acknowledging that the undulating effect of the sidewalk is undesirable. And they've also noticed that changing the curb type and sidewalk configurations throughout neighborhoods is not reasonable as well. Oftentimes we're creating infill developments within existing subdivisions, and changing the curb type from a rolled to a vertical type is just not practical. And they've recognized that pretty consistently in each of these planning board hearings. That's about it that I have for this presentation. John, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. I don't know, Chair, are there questions for Brandon?
I don't see anyone in the queue right now. Do members have any questions?
John, I'm sorry, Brian Harton here. I'm on the line. There's one other aspect I'd like to address.
Okay. Suzanne, is that okay?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So one other thing about these developments, a lot of times the scenario that Brandon's talking about is where the developer is also the builder. So the developer will come in and build the homes in its own subdivision. But oftentimes too, there's an alternate where a developer is just that and then sells the lots off to other builders. And the developer, when he finishes the subdivision, has to put it on a 2-year warranty period. But these subdivisions often fill out in the first, second year. So somebody other than the developer will be cutting into the curbs, cutting into the road, cutting into the infrastructure that's currently under warranty by the developer through a right-of-way permit. And so that's going to muddy the waters if there's a failure of one of those, or if it disturbs the infrastructure adjacent to, as to who's responsible to repair it. And I think once the municipality issues a right-of-way permit, then they're kind of accepting responsibility to make sure that is done properly and through bonded contractors, et cetera. But there'll be some finger pointing inevitably. And that was just one other little fact that I wanted to bring up.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Hi, this is Skylar Quinn with Michelson Construction. If you don't mind, I wanted to bring up a couple points as well.
Do you want to monitor this, Suzanne? I had intended to go to Bill and then perhaps others, but I don't really mind either.
However you want to handle it, John, and it's fine. You don't have to go through me on this if you just want to go ahead and facilitate that.
Sure, Skylar, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to bring up just how the situation, how these transitions apply when you have a subdivision on a little bit more of a grade. I saw in one of the changes to code, and basically, like you said, it would allow subdivisions less than 60 feet in width to be able to use the rolled curb. And I wouldn't support that, because when you have subdivisions on grade and as these transitions get longer and wider, it just amplifies the problems that we have. As an example, I calculated out in our subdivision, Bridal Creek, we were one of the first ones to get a variance. You basically have about 33 to 49 feet, depending on how wide you wanted the driveway to be, of transition for one of the bigger lots. So the way we did it, we went back and forth on where we place these transitions and the driveway entrances, and what we ended up deciding to do is not having any transitions at all and just going all vertical curb in the entire thing, and then we were just going to bust out each location as needed when we went to build the houses, because it was just such a headache, and it was just so hard to predetermine where to put these driveway cuts. And then we saw that the planning board was open to getting a variance, so we ended up doing the same and ended up putting in rolled curb. So I just wanted to bring up the grade issue as well.
All right, thank you. So Bill, you want to share your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weddleton. I just wanted to jump in and mention, as a developer and a builder, that it's becoming glaringly obvious that we need to change the code because of all the variances that are being issued. And I know there are some debatable points, but I think what's practical is what's happening. Developers and builders, because of the limitations of a vertical curb with a driveway cut, just make it virtually impossible to guess up front whether you're going to have a house with a garage right or a garage left. And we work very closely with our customers, and that is an issue that comes up because the great room or the kitchen is oriented in such a way where on individual houses you need to put the garage either right or left, and you have to make that decision in conjunction with your customer. So if you get in an instance where you do have to bust out the existing vertical curb with the driveway cut, it really diminishes the quality of the installation, like Brandon and Brian had suggested. And just in conclusion, I recently had a subdivision that I developed off of Abbott Road, and all of the existing infrastructure there was rolled curb and attached sidewalk, and it would have been very awkward to transition this vertical curve with driveway cuts and possibly detached sidewalks in this infill subdivision. So the impracticality of this keeps popping up over and over again. And I think where the rubber meets the road is that we're getting variances almost 10 out of 10 times that we request. So I'll conclude with that, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
I don't see anyone in the chat right now. Do members have any questions? Okay, I think we can go ahead and keep moving.
Well, I like that. Silence means yes, right? So essentially where we are, and I think Brandon, perhaps Bill could talk more on this, but this has gone through a very extensive process. We tossed it back, planning and planning zoning commission. Now it's back to us, and we've got an S version presented to us, and then the original version. And where we are with the S version, it doesn't really help the builders at all. It doesn't, and basically if that goes in, there will continue to be steady requests for variances. I think what we saw, with Brandon's presentation and Bill's discussion, it's, the others, it just shows it doesn't meet the needs that they're hitting. So there's just not benefit in that one. So we go back to the original version, and then I kind of read through some of the list of comments on that, and that leaving it open to the traffic engineer to make that determination, I think needs to be fleshed out more with a little more guidance, brackets or understanding, just so it's more clear to meet the concerns that I think the general public had through their comments, and also the planning commission and the planning board. So my expectation or hope is that on Tuesday, we open the public hearing and hear from people, and then postpone it for a couple weeks and look, and then, Forrest and I will work, and I suppose at least one other with, the various builders, and with the department to try to come up with perhaps better section on where it would be allowed. So instead of just relying solely on the traffic engineer, kind of spell out a little more what that would look like when the traffic engineer is making the decision. And then, and maybe it would just look like what the planning board would look like. And it would just save time and money for the developers and get us where we're landing anyway, realistically. And come back either with amendments or, an S1 version on March 1st. So that's my plan. Any other thoughts?
Thanks, John. Actually, Mr. Dunbar is in the queue.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I didn't want to leave the impression that John was being forced to carry all the water on the ordinance that we're both sponsoring. I'll say that I also agree with that course of action. I think the S version, unfortunately, just arrived at a place where it's just not particularly valuable. I don't think anyone on either side kind of wants it. And so I want us to move the original version, as he said. We'll have the public hearing, and then we can hopefully either do an S1 or amendments. And I'll say, to be a little more explicit about what he was saying, if you read through the comments from the public, a number of them are from South Edition, who express a concern that basically their vertical curb would be downgraded to rolled curb. And in speaking with developers, I don't think that was ever the intent of this. They're not going to go into well-established, long-running neighborhoods that have, vertical curb, whether it's South Edition or Rogers Park or anywhere else that might have it, and sort of in redevelopment projects downgrade the curb. Like that's just not the intent. And so I think we could propose amendments that try to sort of protect existing neighborhoods and make clear to the public that this is about future construction, primarily in parts of town that don't have a lot of vertical curb to begin with. I think that's our hope. And then there are a couple other specific concerns, I think, addressed in those comments that hopefully we can do by either amendment or S1. So.
Thanks, Forrest. And I see that Ron Thompson has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond that through the chair to Forrest and John. We agree with their approach. We agree completely with their approach. Adam Trombley, unfortunately, had to be called away and couldn't come into this meeting and make a response, but he wanted me to forward that the administration is willing to definitely proceed the same way that John just proposed and Forrest just proposed, and we think we'll get to a very good product that way.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I don't see anyone else in the queue. Are there any other comments or questions from Assembly members or others here participating? I'll go back to you, John.
Okay. We're off mute. I'm off mute. Well, that's basically, I think we set the plate for this. We kind of showed what you have that large document where it's come to us and then kind of discussed, where that brought us. So just hopefully we'll have the public hearing. I expect we will have the public hearing on Tuesday and then move the original version and postpone action until March 1st.
Thank you, John. So I will check the queue again here to see if any members have any questions or comments. And we'll also note that this AO 2021-71 is item 14K on the agenda. I don't see anyone else in the queue. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for the information and the discussion. And we will take this up on Tuesday. We are adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.